Hello everyone, welcome to MeanLifeStudies. In one of our previous video, we have seen a data analysis case study and we had done data analysis by using aggregate functions where we had used aggregate functions like sum of, minimum of, maximum of, count of, average, right? Now, in this video, we are going to do data analysis for the same data, that is sales information, but we are going to use window functions, okay? Now, what is aggregate functions and what is window function, right? In aggregate functions will take a group of values and it will return a single value as output, right? In case of window functions, it will also take a group of values, but it will return output for each record, right? So that we won't lose any data, okay? That's the advantage of using window function. These are also similar to aggregate function, but we are going to add different windows by adding overclass to aggregate functions, okay? Now we will see what are window functions that we are going to use in this video so that we can use them. We are going to do analysis of this data, that is sales information data, okay? That is, in aggregate function we have some, right? Sum of, average of, min of, max of, and count, right? Now we can use all these aggregate functions as window functions, okay? Now we will see all these things, okay? Next, what are the main window functions that most of use cases are using, like rank, dense rank, row number, lead, and lab, okay? These are the most useful window functions that most of times we are going to use these functions, okay? Now we will see one by one to help in data analysis of this data, okay? If you see here, if I execute this query, you can see here this is the data which we have, that is sales information. Now we are going to do analysis for this one, okay? Now if you see, in order to find the number of transactions in aggregate function, what you are using count, right? I mean, we are going one by one so that you will understand it very clearly. Okay. Select count of transaction ID from sales info. Okay. Now, if you execute this query, you can see here, this is the only a single number, right? You are getting a collection of input values, but you are taking a collection of input values and it will return a single value only, right, as output. When you are using aggregate function, that is count of, right? But my requirement is not to lose any data, but I should get this value as output, okay? How it is possible if you use window function? Now if you see here, we have total of 20 transactions are there, but if you count the number of transactions, you are losing it, right? Okay, if you want to find for each user id, you can use it, right? Therefore you should use user id or customer, right? Customer id comma count of. Now you have to use here group by customer id, okay? Now even if you do this, you will get number of transactions for each customer id, so that even though if you are using like this, even though it is customer id or store id or it can be anything, but the entire data that we are not getting it, right? I mean the remaining data. So that's where a window functions comes in. Now we'll see one by one. Select count of transaction id. Now what I'm doing, I'm adding overclass to this count, I mean this aggregate function, okay? If I use over from sales info, now if I execute this query, you can see here all 20s you are getting, right? Now if I want my all data, that is, I have to use stop, right? If I use star, now if I execute this query, you can see here this is the total number of transactions, right? It will be returning for each record, right? Now my requirement is count it, right? If our first transaction comes in, therefore you should count it as first one up to one. For the next comes in, you have to count it two. Likewise, you need to count all of them, right? Like as transaction, okay? Now if you see here, if you use order by, on which basis you are going to order, you have to order in the sense date only, right? So you have to use order by date, okay? Now if we execute this query, you can see here we are getting count on the basis of date, right? You can see it, okay? These are the number of transactions, right? Now my requirement is to find the number of transactions for each customer. So in order to find the number of transactions for each customer and you should not lose any data, then you have to use window function. Therefore you will be using like this, and with addition to that you have to add partition by. Okay, partition by class. Partition by what? On the basis of for each customer ID, right? So you have to use customer name or customer name or customer ID also, anything. Okay, now if you see here, partition by customer in the sense you're going to divide the entire. See, if you have not mentioned any partition by default, it's single window. Single window in the sense the total comes into single window, right? Even if you have not used order by or not, no matter, if you have not used any partition by default it comes under single window. Okay, now if you use partition by, then the entire data will divide into chunks in the sense windows. Okay, windows, how many windows it will return? On the basis of number of customers. How many customers are there? One or two or three or five, right? There could be any number. How many customers are there? That many windows will be returned. Okay, now for each customer ID you are going to return number of transaction as per their order of date. I mean, on the transaction date you will be returning. Okay, now if you execute this query, if you see here, before executing, this is the order of date, right, for entire scenario, right? But if you use partition by, if you now execute, now you can see here 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, like this you are getting it, right? This means if you see here, for each customer ID or customer ID or customer name, anything, you are getting the number of transactions on the basis of their date. Okay, this is order of date. Okay, if you have not used any order by date, now let's see what will happen. It will return the number of transactions. How many are transactions by each user ID? The total number of transactions will be returned here. Now you can see it, right? This is the number of transactions for each user ID. For Ananya, this is the total transaction 444. Likewise, for each user ID, you are returning the total number of transactions. Okay, if you use order by date, then you will be finding on the basis of a date you are counting it. Okay, first transaction, second, third, and fourth for each user ID. Likewise, you can see all values. Okay, that's a use case of this one. I mean, count of transaction ID, number of transactions you are finding, right? Similarly, if you want to find minimum of, if you see here, for minimum, the date is the right date column. For date column, what is the minimum? In order to find the minimum, you have to use minimum of, I mean, the first date and last date of transaction. Okay, minimum of date comma maximum of date from sales info. Okay, now if you execute this query, you can see here you're getting the minimum date and maximum date, and you are losing remaining data, right? So in order to not to lose any data, now we'll see, select minimum of date from sales info. Either it could be minimum or maximum. Okay, if you see here, you're getting a single, right? If you use here star comma minimum of this one, then you have to group by all columns, right? So that the entire data you will get, right? Otherwise, if you want to find for each customer ID, then you have to mention it customer ID, then you have to use group by customer ID, right? Now if you see here, for each customer ID you are getting the minimum date. For 1000 it is the minimum date. For 103 this is the minimum date. Likewise, these are the minimum dates, right? If you want to find the maximum date also, you can use max of. Okay, now you can see it, right? Maximum dates of each user ID. Okay, now we'll use this as window function. Select star comma max of date or min of date over, so I'm just using over class. Okay, from sales info. Now if you execute this query, you can see here this is the minimum date, right? And if you have not mentioned anything in over class, by default it's a single window. So that is the reason for entire data it will be returning the minimum value of date. Okay, now similarly for maximum also it will return the maximum of date. I'm just returning this as one more, that is max of date over. Okay, now if you see here, you can see it, right? This is the 23, this is the minimum date, this is the maximum date. Likewise we can return. Okay, now if you see here, in over class we are not mentioning anything. Okay, so that is the reason it is taking it as single window. If I use here for each customer, then I have to use partition by. partition by customer ID. Okay. Now, if you see here, for each customer ID, what is the minimum? That will be written here. Okay, this column. Now, if you see here, what's the error? Customer ID spelling mistake. I'm sorry. Now, if you see here, for each user ID, it is the minimum date. It will be returning as only single date. This is the minimum date for each user ID. Like that is, you can see similarly 2, 3, and then 5. Likewise for max also. Here only you are mentioning partition by, so that it will be returning number of windows. How many windows? On the basis of customer. How many customers are there? Those number of windows will be returned. Clear? Now, if you use order by date, then it will return order wise the transaction date. Okay, you can see here the minimum date it will return. You can see up to now this is the minimum date for each user ID. You can see Mahendra, these four are there, right? These four rows, see here minimum date of these four. What is that? 1 1 1 1, right? This is the minimum date, so that is why it is returning minimum date. Likewise all are returning. Okay, similarly for maximum date, if you want to here, if you use descending order, then see what will happen. See here, you are mentioning order by date as descending order, right? So that first, on the first day it is 16th, there is no one before. Okay, that is why it is returning 16. If you comes in second, that is 11th. So up to now, what is the minimum? It will compare with these two. What is the minimum? That is 11. It will return 11. Likewise, if you order them in descending order, for each it will return the same date, right? But if you mention only ascending order, I mean by default it's ascending order only, right? So it will take the minimum value for each one. That is the minimum. What is that? For each customer ID, this is the minimum, right? Similarly, you can use for max also. Okay. Now, if you see, we have seen count, min and max, right? Now we'll see sum. Now tell me, what is the total sales amount? We should use sum of sale amount, right? Select sum of sales amount from sales info. Okay. If you execute this query, you can see here this is the amount, right? But we are losing remaining data. Okay, even though if you are using a store ID, okay, for each store what is the total sales, or even if you want to use a customer also, for each customer what is the total sale amount. I mean sale amount in the sense it is for stores, right? So in case of customer ID, it is a purchase amount. Okay, now you have to use group by store ID, right? Now if you see here, you are getting store, for each store you are getting these values. Okay, just remember these values 23501245 like this. Okay, now we are going to use this aggregate function as window functions. Okay, and that will give some more advantages to do even more in-depth analysis of any large amount of data. Okay, I'm going to use a select star comma, I'm going to use this sales, I mean sum of sales amount as window function, so that I have to use over class to this aggregate function. Okay, from sales info. Okay, now before that, if you use only sum of sales amount, what is the amount? That is 4600, right? Something is right. Now if you see, if you execute this query, you will get that output, that is 46 something is there, right? That will return for each record. You can see 4600, that will return for each record, because of in overclass, if you have mentioned for aggregate function overclass, then this aggregate function will work as window functions by default. If you have not mentioned anything in overclass, it will be a single window. I mean entire data comes under single window. Okay, there is no chunks, only one data. Now if you mention any partition by, then partition by what? For each store ID, right? Or store ID. Now if you see here, this means for each store ID, what is the total sales amount? It will return the same value. I mean, for each store ID, what is the total? That value will be written for each store. Okay. Now, if you see here, this is the total amount that we got it right just before 235012451005. These are the total sum for each store. Okay, that is why you are getting like this. Okay, because of here how many windows? Here number of windows are 3 because of partition by store ID. How many stores? 1 2 3 ABC, right? So it is dividing entire data into 3 chunks or 3 windows. Okay. Now, if you have not mentioned here order by, this is the output. But if you want to find on the basis of their date, what is the total amount up to now? So you have to use order by date. This will be called as cumulative sum. Okay. You are going to find the sum of up to order by date, right? And I mean you're going to find the sum of up to date. Now, if you see here, for store A, this is the first date, and for the same store, different users and this date, right? Say different users are coming for same store. These are the different dates only, right? But we are ordering store ID because of we are finding for each store ID, right? Now, what is the sales amount for the first day? That is 20. On the second date, I mean fourth is 50. What is the total amount up to now? That is 70. Likewise, it will return the total sum up to now. Up to now in the sense for each date. Up to now. For first one, it is 20. Second one, it is 50. So it will be adding up. It will be adding up to now. You can see this is the 2350. And these are the values, right? Rolling sum or cumulative sum. Okay. This is the advantage of using a window function. By using window functions, we can find the rolling sum. Okay. Now here another concept comes in. You can also use here rows between one preceding and current row. Now if you execute this query, you can see here you are getting for each partition ID, you're getting, see here, you're considering only rows between one preceding and current row. See here, for each customer ID, what is this? Which store ID you are finding just before one and current one. For this one, there is no before value. So that is why it is returning only 20. Okay, for this one, there is one previous value. We need to consider one previous value. That is how much? 20. What is this? 50. So it is returning 70. For next one, it is considering the current value and one preceding, that is 50. You are returning 50, right? Next one, you can see 50, 150, this is 100, that is 250. Likewise, you can use anything. It could be rows between two preceding or one preceding, anything, right? It means the consecutive of 2 days, right? I mean yesterday's sales and today's sales, right? Likewise, we can use any application or any use cases, okay? By using sum of, we'll be adding that to over class so that it will be working as window function. Clear? I hope you are understanding these things. Now one more thing, similarly we can use for average also. In place of sum, it will be returning average. Here you are using store. For each customer also we can find it. Okay. Now I'm just copying it. See here, I'm going to use average of for each customer ID's purchases. I'm just using here customers. Okay, the same concept. You can use anything. Okay. I'm just removing here rows between all these things. And even though if you just lose it, you can see here the same values you will get. You can see here average, not sum, right? Average. Okay, 230. Okay, because of you are not mentioning anything in over class, right? Now if you mention partition by customer ID, then you can see here, so this is the total average up to 20 transactions. This is the average value. Okay, for each customer you are finding this. If you use partition by, now you can see for each customer ID, I mean this is the average amount. Okay, for each customer you can see here for Mahendra this is the amount, for Mahi this is the amount. Okay. Now if you want to find on the basis of order ID, order date, you can use order by date. Okay. If you execute this, you can see here, this is the 20. So that's why it is returning 20 for each customer. See here, for each customer, it is already partition by, right? We have already used partition by. For each customer, this is on first day. This is second day, third day, fourth day of this customer, right? If you see here, 20, 20. Now next one, 60. What is the average of this one, 20 and 60? That is 40, right? So that's why you're getting 40 average of, right? Now for 510, 510, what is the amount? 60 and 20, 580, sorry, 590, right? 590 by 3, how much? This is the value. Likewise, you will be returning the average values of rolling average for each customer ID, right? Similarly, you can use here if you want to find the rolling average up to how many rows before or current value, you can use this concept, rows between how many preceding values that you want to up to now. I mean current row or one row is preceding, anything. Okay, you can use any values. I mean any concept like if you want to find the rows between, see here, if I use rows between one preceding, okay, two preceding, I'll use two preceding and one preceding means it will be returning the average of two values before and one value up to before to current row card, right? So for this one, you can see there is no values before. So that's why it is returning null. It will return null. For this value, it will return up to two rows before. There is only one row, but there is no one more. So by default in SQL, if you use average, it will neglect null values. Okay, now if you see for this value, it will return the average of this one and this one. I mean, you are finding the average of two preceding for these two values up to one preceding in the sense for current record up to one preceding this value up to this value. Okay, that is the concept. Now if you execute this query, you can see here you are getting null for each customer because of you have used partition by. Okay, for each customer in the sense there is no previous, so that's why it is returning null. But actually you are also getting here null because of the average of null and not null, we cannot find it. But in case of SQL, it will default by default neglecting null values whenever it is finding average values. Okay, now, the most important and main window functions, those are rank, dense rank, row number, lead, and lag. These are the most useful window functions, okay, in most of scenarios in real world projects. Now, these window functions that we will discuss in the next videos because of the length of video is getting increased. Okay, I hope you understand all of these things. Okay, don't forget to like and share. Thank you.